Yes, child.
What'd you say?
So what do... Yes, child.
Hello, and welcome to Cryptic Web Chronicles. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy today's video. Today I'll be covering a new bit of drama that has arisen in the Patrick S. Tomlinson lolcow trolling saga. If you haven't been following along so far, however, be sure to check out my Patrick S. Tomlinson playlist to get the full scoop on this insane story that continues to unfold. If you've been following the story, you ought to know by now about the failed lawsuit Patrick S. Tomlinson filed in 2021 against 60 anonymous internet users. This hilarious bit of litigation may be one of the dumbest attempts at a lawsuit to ever be made. That's likely why it ultimately failed in an epic fashion, and only brought Patrick more pain and humiliation along the way. According to the Opie and Anthony forums, which was the primary target of this lawsuit, Patrick secretly received over $100,000 in legal funds from the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association, also known as the SFWA. As I've mentioned previously, this group seems to have a pretty sketchy past, and they've even been accused of harboring numerous pedophiles among their ranks previously. It's said that SFWA members even raised legal funds for a predator named Edward Kramer after he was accused of molestation. If these allegations are true, and I personally believe they are, then these people could be up to some pretty sick shit, and I question what else they're hiding in the shadows. According to O and A forums, SFWA provided Patrick with over $100,000 to fund his idiotic lawsuit, something they allegedly did in secret, without the consent or knowledge of their donors. Additionally, SFWA allegedly also had all the involved individuals sign non-disclosure agreements in order to ensure this disgusting misappropriation of donor funds would never be shared publicly. Even worse, it's believed the SFWA also agreed to pay any sanctions that Patrick would incur if he lost the case. I wonder if they regret that decision. Well, Patrick did end up losing the case in an epic fashion, and as a result he indeed faced a hefty serving of court sanctions. Because of how the civil courts work in California, which is where most of this case played out, Patrick not only wasted over $100,000 of SFWA money paying his lawyers during his failed lawsuit, but as a result of his loss, he also owed an additional $30,000 in legal fees to John Doe No. 1, the admin of Opie and Anthony forums. Patrick's lawsuit failed to even identify any of the people he was trying to sue, let alone bring them to court. And by the end of it, a couple years later, the $30,000 Patrick owed ballooned into an over $80,000 debt, thanks to the interest it built over time. Patrick drug his feet and refused to pay this debt, allowing the interest to grow to the point that John Doe No. 1, aka Quasi, the admin of O and A forums, actually made a rather large profit off being sued by Patrick. Pat and his wife Nikki later submissively paid Quasi every single cent he was owed, having been defeated in a most hilarious fashion. By the way, just for your information, the O and A forums points out that if you have credible grounds to suspect that the SFWA has unlawfully financed a frivolous nuisance lawsuit in violation of their 501c3 status, you can use IRS Form 3949A to report this suspicious activity to the IRS. That's just what they're saying over on O and A forums, though. I'm not a lawyer or a legal expert, and I'm only sharing this as it's relevant to the drama. However, I'm sure any confusion about what's going on here can be sorted out by the IRS. You'd think after this humiliating experience in court, Patrick would be apprehensive to file any more lawsuits. But as I covered previously, in February of 2024, Pat would do exactly that. And this lawsuit, according to many observers, is even stupider. This time around, Patrick would file suit against the city of Milwaukee and a lone Milwaukee police officer named Lyndon Evans, due to the fact Patty was swatted a number of times previously by an unknown individual online. Patrick claims the police response to these supposed swatting calls was unreasonable. However, some might argue that the police have a duty to respond to calls like these to ensure the public's safety. Regardless, this lawsuit is still in its early stages, and with Patrick facing off against the city of Milwaukee, it's likely to be a long, arduous, and expensive process. And considering Patrick's track record in court, it's no wonder many are expecting this suit to be another loss of epic proportions. Additionally, there's been speculation on O&A forums that this suit is also being funded by the Sfwa, though if that's the case, they're obviously trying to keep it a secret so their donors and members don't realize the organization's funds are being wasted on a lolcow's frivolous revenge lawsuit. In my opinion, this suit is also doomed to fail, as the city of Milwaukee will likely pull out all the stops and do everything they can to ensure Patrick doesn't succeed. With all this happening, you'd think Patrick would be focused on his lawsuit and other more important things. However, you're likely already aware that Patrick appears instead to spend the most of his day arguing with trolls online. Indeed, it's apparent to me that Patrick is obsessed with responding to his trolls, and he's known to tweet at them hundreds of times in a single day, usually to make prison threats and tell them their lives are over. But one person in particular, the subject of today's video, has been heavily targeted by Patrick and his gaggle of ball washers online, and as it just so happens, this individual would not be an internet troll at all. Instead, it would be a woman known by many in the literary community for her efforts to uplift and support aspiring and marginalized authors. Leslie Varney is an agent and co-founder at Pretness Literary, a literary agency located in Washington. For years, Pretness Literary has worked with up-and-coming authors to help put them on the path of reaching their career goals. So you might ask, what could Patrick possibly have against this woman? Why is he so obsessed with following her around Twitter and threatening her? What could have sparked this conflict that now has him threatening to, quote, sue her into poverty? Well, it all started when Leslie called one of Pat's trolls a cheeky bastard on Twitter, and suggested that Patrick was being unnecessarily rude to her. Ironically, Leslie was dragged into this mess after she left an encouraging tweet to Ugi Ungachungwe, a Nigerian man who seeks American welfare and a free ticket into the United States. Ugi became one of Patrick's ball washers after he began targeting the SFWA for attention and charity. Patrick and other SFWA members seem to enjoy showing off their support of Ugi, using him as a token of sorts in order to virtue signal to their Twitter followers and other people in the literary industry. And although Leslie initially left a message supporting Ugi and his efforts to sneak into America, it wouldn't take long for Ugi and Pat to turn on her. All it took, actually, was Leslie remarking that Patrick was being rude to her. It started when Ugi posted about how he desperately wanted another U.S. visa, with Leslie replying a short time later with a message of encouragement. Kyle Tomlinson, a parody Twitter account of Patrick's little brother, would respond to Leslie to point out that the last time Ugi received a U.S. visa, he broke the rules and tried to stay in the U.S. illegally after the visa expired. Patrick showed up in the thread a short time later to threaten Kyle with prison, even though it appears Pat wasn't even mentioned or involved. This would pique Leslie's curiosity, and she began to ask Patrick about why he continued to feed his trolls and follow them everywhere. Patrick began to dictate to Leslie what he claims is the reality of the situation. Patrick is known for being a stubborn, abrasive, pig-headed asshole towards anyone that fails to take his every word as the gospel truth, and as a result, Leslie immediately became the enemy when she dared question how Patrick handles his trolls. Patrick and his ball washers, mainly Ugi, and another fat, unemployed loser from Oregon named Shane Noakes, began targeting Leslie relentlessly, hurling a variety of insults and accusations her way. Shane Noakes even went as far as to suggest Leslie was a Nazi, and that she deserved to be killed for questioning Patrick's narrative. Patrick seems to have gleefully cheered on as his ball washers targeted Leslie repeatedly, and as far as I can tell, has never denounced any of this extreme behavior. Patrick even began threatening Leslie's job, seemingly acting like he had the connections to get her fired. Patrick has claimed this entire time to be a victim of stalking by a group of so-called cyber terrorists, so to see him adopt similar tactics against an innocent woman online shocked many spectators following the story. I'd like to remind you that all Leslie initially did to trigger all this was question Patrick's narrative on the trolling he's been experiencing. She pointed out that Patrick replies to his trolls hundreds of times a day and follows them around Twitter to engage in arguments and slap fights with them. From what I can tell, This is all it seems to have taken to trigger Patrick hard enough that he started acting like one of his own supposed stalkers. Although this drama with Leslie all started during the summer of 2023, it's still going on to this day. Despite the fact Patrick has Leslie blocked on Twitter, he still seems to obsessively read her tweets and continues to harass and berate her from behind a block. During this time, Leslie has grown to become one of Patrick's most vocal critics, and her perspective on his situation is especially enlightening thanks to the fact she is a literary agent who's been involved in the industry for a number of years. According to Leslie, Patrick's book sales numbers are extremely underwhelming, and it's believed that he isn't earning any real income from his writing efforts at all. If this is true, then that would mean Patrick is a failed author clinging on to a desperate delusion. Leslie has also formed an interesting theory about why Patrick behaves the way he does. Leslie claims he shows patterns that indicate cluster B personality disorder, which causes things like antisocial, impulsive, and deceitful behavior. In my opinion, these are all accurate descriptions of how Patrick behaves, and I think much like Patrick's tits and stomach, Leslie's theory holds some serious weight. At one point, Leslie would even appear as a guest on Nice Podcast Stupid, a podcast hosted by O&A Forums member Dan Mullen, another one of Patrick's sworn enemies, and a supposed shot caller in the cyberstalker terror cult Patrick has obsessed over for the last several years. This podcast appearance only cemented her spot on Patrick's list of enemies.
Happy Friday, Funsters! The Dan Man is here. Welcome to Nice Podcast Stupid. We have a very special guest. I think most people in the chat are aware of who we have tonight. We have the indomitable Queen, Leslie Varney of Prentice Literary. Leslie, how are you this fine Friday evening?
A little overwhelmed at the approval there, but thank you.
Leslie, you are becoming a star amongst fans of the show and of a certain online community. So we're really excited to have you, and it's a pleasure.
Yay.
Thank you for coming aboard, and really looking forward to the next hour talking to you and learning more about you.
Absolutely, me too.
Great.
Anything I don't know about myself yet? Perhaps we will by the end of this.
Awesome. So before we get started, just a couple of things I wanted to share with the audience. So 2 things we're doing tonight. I wanted to give back a little bit to Leslie and to her agency, to her authors, definitely. Leslie, as you guys may know, is a literary agent with Prentice Literary, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what they do there. They are a boutique literary agency. They help
Hear me.
a lot
My
of
thoughts on
diverse,
the SWFA funding the Frivolous lawsuit against 60 John Does. I think it was ill-advised. I think that whoever their lawyer was really reaching for straws on that one. And I don't know why, as I say, I can't even imagine why they thought that this would work. And I understand the frustration that they were having, but what do you do? Again, how you're going to deal with that. If you want to spend a whole bunch of money trying to have that taken off the record, and it doesn't work, people are going to laugh at you, and people who have put money into you, namely the writers, and also publishers, and also agents, everybody in the field is going to have a difficult time supporting that.
Great. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me, Leslie? Oh no, I think we lost Leslie. She can't hear us, but that was, we're right at the 1 hour mark, and it's kind of like Cinderella, the carriage turned to a pumpkin, unfortunately. Leslie, can you hear us? All right, we'll give it a minute to see if Leslie rejoins. I was going to start wrapping up anyway, but it's been awesome having Leslie on. We're going to do the drawing.
Following this podcast appearance, Patrick's online stalking of Leslie only escalated further. Patrick has attacked Leslie on Twitter in a number of ways, including threatening to end her career, and more recently a threat to, quote, sue her into poverty. This lawsuit threat occurred after an incident involving the recent Penguin Con drama that I covered in my previous video. As I mentioned previously, it appears to me as though people in the industry may finally be waking up to Patrick's abusive and idiotic behavior, as all his panels at Penguin Con were cancelled, and it appears he's been banned from the convention entirely. Leslie, curious about what was going on, would write a letter to Penguin Con staff in April of 2024 in order to get more info on the situation. I'm writing to see if there will be clarification on the situation with author Patrick Tomlinson. I'm sure you're familiar with many of the antics that surround Mr. Tomlinson, and perhaps with an understanding that he is without blame for his situation. But I want to assure you that this isn't the complete picture. I encountered Mr. Tomlinson first last June when he and another author took offense that I didn't immediately believe their account of harassment, and I communicated with their supposed terrorist stalkers. These are just two examples of the hyperbolized language they used. For me, they used words like wicked, moron, mouth breather, evil, imbecile. Since that time, Mr. Tomlinson and his associates have attacked me mercilessly on social media, up to and including a death threat from one of his associates, much to the expressed entertainment of Mr. Tomlinson. During this drama, I received messages from several other people who had faced the same treatment, and it didn't take a genius to notice they were all women. In fact, I had originally called Mr. Tomlinson and his fellow author out on the misogyny and homophobia they expressed openly or supported quietly, especially in light of their accusing faceless attackers of being racists and homophobes. Anyway, this is all a long-winded request to know if I can look forward to attending PenguinCon in the future, knowing he won't be attending. I've been considering how to bring this subject up to the WorldCon 2025 committee since I know he plans to attend, and I'd appreciate knowing if I can point to your decision as a precedent. Thanks in advance for any help you can provide. Leslie, the PenguinCon staff member, wrote back to Leslie. Hi there. I'm so sorry to hear about your experience. As our dealings with Tomlinson have escalated to the board level, I have forwarded this request to them, and hopefully they can respond better than I can. Also, this will share your original email back to you, as you requested in your other email. Let me know if there is anything specific I can help with, but I'm leaving this in the hands of the board at this point. I don't mean for that to sound like a brush-off at all, but I'd rather this be handled by the broader PenguinCon authorities rather than just me. Leslie would share screenshots of this exchange on Twitter a short time later. Even though he has her blocked, Patrick would show up in the replies to further threaten and intimidate Leslie. This is how you get sued into poverty, Leslie. You are mentally ill. Seek help. From the looks of it, Leslie has got the ball rolling on bringing more recognition to Patrick's abusive treatment towards women online. You might be shocked to learn that Leslie is far from the first woman Patrick has targeted and harassed on Twitter, as it appears he has a history of pulling the same intimidation tactics on other women on Twitter in the past. In one instance, Patrick accused a woman of plagiarism for no clear reason, and then decided that she was part of the so-called criminal cyberstalker cult that he thinks is gang stalking him. So she became yet another one of Patrick's sworn enemies. It's painfully obvious to me from all of this that Patrick has some sort of issue with the way he views women, and I think he clearly doesn't have any respect for them. He's tweeted some pretty disgusting stuff about his current wife, like that he, quote, has access to her pussy. But what's even more shocking is that in 2011, Patrick was arrested and found guilty for threatening to violently murder his own wife and newborn daughter. He was divorced and lost all custody of his daughter a short time later thanks to this incident. To quote the official police report, one of the comments that Patrick made to Rona was that he was going to wait until Adrian had the baby and then kill both her and the newborn. I think this tells you all you need to know about the content of Patrick's character. In my opinion, the guy is a sick, twisted asshole, and Leslie is right about him having some sort of personality disorder. This developing story will surely have more to come, as neither side seems determined to back down at the moment. This showdown between Patrick and Leslie may lead to some new and interesting developments, so make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you're always up to date on our new releases. Thanks for watching, and that's all for today. This has been Cryptic Web Chronicles.